everybody, I just saw Infinity War last night. For once Australia got something early, so it might actually be worth putting up a review on this one. I was going to make this a non-spoiler review, but I thought about it and I really had the most to say about the ending, so whatever, everyone's going to see it tomorrow. Now, as a side note, I'll just mention that this review is going to be in the context of how this is meant to be seen, which is the 19th installment in the MCU. If you've missed some of the movies, you'll probably get by. I think you'd at very least need to have watched Guardians of the Galaxy, Civil War, Ragnarok and Doctor Strange. But I'm pretty sure anyone that makes this their first trip into the MCU, there's going to be some confusion. With sequels, I usually give them an extra point if they stand on their own 2 feet, which this doesn't really do, but in this case, given what the MCU has accomplished, I'm not going to be factoring that aspect into this. As the beginning of the end of the MCU as we know it, it's pretty damn near perfect. So what did the film do well? First and foremost, I was not expecting the juggling act of all the different characters and tones and stories to be handled so well. This movie was about 2.5 hours, and if ever a movie could have got away with being 3 hours, it was this. So I was a little skeptical going in. Civil War danced a very fine line already in that respect, and this movie basically had everyone that was in that movie, and then also threw in Hulk, Doctor Strange, Thor. I assumed all the new characters from Ragnarok would be coming over because that was the end of that movie led into this. Also all the new characters in Black Panther. Plus this movie was basically bringing in 5 of its own characters with Thanos and the Order. So, spoilers starting now, they got around this by basically removing the problem. Everyone from Ragnarok outside of Thor is pretty much killed in the opening scene, although there's no sign of Valkyrie, so I assume she's safe. So yeah, none of those characters were carried over. Hulk is only in one scene, although Banner's a pretty major character, so he wasn't really carried over either. And Wakanda only turns up very late at the end of the movie, and all of the Black Panther cast are basically just cameos. So it ends up having a similar number of characters to Civil War. This time though, the screen time is a lot more balanced. Civil War was of course a Captain America movie, so it was mostly Captain America and Tony Stark. Another clever way that this movie made the most of the screen time, which I did see coming, was by pretty much having every scene contain multiple characters at once. The character surprisingly fleshed out the most, and with a surprisingly large amount of screen time, was actually Thanos, which was great because he's now my favourite villain in the MCU. In terms of tone, they kind of shifted it around a little at the start depending which characters you were with. All of the movies have different tones, so I could see this being a bit of a problem too. But pretty soon the weight of the whole situation kind of sets the tone for the movie, and it has creates its own tone, which was good. I'd probably describe it as a much darker version of Guardians of the Galaxy, tonally speaking. Also, there was plenty of fan service. It was awesome seeing Red Skull back. It was cool seeing Thanos actually get all 5 stones, which the trailers really led you to believe wouldn't happen. We finally got to see Thor mourn the losses in Ragnarok properly, which was something that a lot of fans were a bit funny about. Stark had all his cool new Iron Man tech. Spider-Man had another callback to his Star Wars scene in Civil War. The new characters were all really good. They squeezed in as many side characters as they could, like Pepper and Ned, without really overstuffing it. The fight scenes were incredible, especially the Hulk versus Thanos at the start. There's a scene where Iron Man, Spider-Man and all the Guardians almost get the gauntlet. That was intense. The ending battle. It was great to see the Guardians interacting with the proper Avengers. Also, I saw this in IMAX 3D, and by God is that the way to see this movie. Final major positives, up until the end, the death scenes were all very impactful. Heimdall, knowing Disney, I wouldn't have been surprised if there was no deaths, even though there was always predicted to be a lot. Heimdall was a good start because he's a fan favourite and he's a solid character, but he's also fairly disposable. And then this is followed directly with Loki, which was really sad, really well done scene. I'm not even a huge Loki fan, I only really started getting into him in Ragnarok, but it was such a good and moving end to his character. It's just a shame that the trailers pretty much spoiled that scene too. Gamora was a huge shock because she's pretty much the glue that holds the Guardians of the Galaxy together, and of course that's an ongoing series. Vision was another one that was ruined by the trailer, but you got a lot of good intense scenes out of that. There was quite a few scenes where he almost kind of died as they tried to get the stone. Although I didn't like how sort of nerfed he was. They made him into a really weak character, which was sort of necessary for the plot, but he's one of the most powerful characters normally, and even Age of Ultron sort of set that up. So it was a bit weird. They sort of explained it by him getting wounded by a special weapon sort of early in the movie, but it was a pretty weak explanation. But now to get to the major problems that I had, and it was basically all tied to the ending. So massive spoiler, Thanos gets all the stones and wipes out half the universe, and then we lose most of the Avengers. So pretty much the only ones that don't die are Tony Stark and Captain America, or Nomad as he's known here, which I feel it's got to be a bit of a fuck you to all the fans that were so sure that those two were going to be the ones that did die. So Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, all of the Guardians, Black Panther and many others, even Nick Fury and Maria Hill, they're all wiped out at the end. Now the problem with this is not that they killed off all these characters, it's that these deaths are clearly not going to stick. So the whole end of the movie was going to be undone at some point. They could have ended with Thor killing Thanos. That almost happened. There was a bit of a fake out ending there. That would have been pretty satisfying. Or better yet, they could have used the ending that they used, but had Avengers like Stark and Cap and Thor be the ones to die. Because it's supposed to be a random half. It could be any of them. They even had a scene at the end where Thanos is talking to a young Gamora. It's sort of like a dream sequence. And for a minute, I thought that Thanos had died. Like he was one of the random half that was killed with the snap. That would have been really cool and unexpected and sort of concluded everything. So had the deaths been those characters whose arcs were actually finished and whose contracts were up, I would have been half thinking like, are they actually dead, and feel much more gravity in the situation and much more apprehension going into the next film, be much more excited for it. But as they killed off characters that we know are definitely coming back, they've had movies confirmed, you can now bet that there's going to be some sort of time manipulation or something to do with Captain Marvel to bring them back. And to be honest, I wouldn't even be surprised if they bring back Loki and Gamora and characters that were killed earlier in the movie. And it's really going to undermine this movie when that happens. Because they got so close, they just got so close to perfect and just stuck the landing in my opinion. Also, final criticism, there's no Hawkeye. And can the directors please stop lying about stuff like this? Manipulating trailers. Hulk is also not in the ending battle. It doesn't add to the surprise in the film when people do this. It doesn't prevent spoilers. For me, all it does, it just leads to me trying to guess when these characters are going to pop up. You can sort of tell where the story's going a lot of the time. Well, not so much in this movie, but in when this is done in the past, to a degree in this movie. And you're sort of thinking, oh, I bet Hawkeye will pop up and, cover this base for them, or, Hulk's going to turn up now because he's in that scene in the trailer. And when you're trying to guess the movie, or not even guess, but you think you know, and you're trying to guess how it just fits together, it can be really distracting from what's actually going on. It's not a spoiler to just not show Hulk in the credits, or to just refuse to discuss why Hawkeye or Ant-Man are not in the marketing. Anyway, it's still a really solid film, especially for part one of a two-parter. I give this a very high 4.5 stars, and it's now my second favourite part of the MCU, just behind Winter Soldier.